All right, I am pleased to be joined by the host of George on Sports, George Eghator. How's it going, George?
I'm great. I'm great. Thank you for having me on the show. We're not too far away from the start of the new season now. When the Rams take on the Bills, I'm counting down pretty much. I'm counting down to a kickoff because it's been a long wait without it. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking some football today.
Yeah, thanks again for wanting to come on. And before we start talking about the NFL season, at the time of this recording was on Saturday and Thursday, where there was the Hall of Fame game. But if you want to kind of talk about your show slash podcast, and if you want to go ahead, and I believe you're also in the UK, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So I'm in the UK. I actually played American football over here for 11 years. I played as a running back for 11 years. I only just sort of hung up the cleats last season. So I've always been into the sport. The NFL has just been a massive part of my life, and it will be sort of for the foreseeable future. And yeah, George on Sports is basically me. I cover the NFL through podcasts. You mentioned I'm in the UK here, so I go to a lot of events. When the international games come over, which they will be this year in October, I tend to find myself at those events, media days, practice days, getting up and close and personal with the players and the coaches. So I cover that side of things as well. I also cover UK American football over here. So I have like a media team where we cover the sport over here as well. But not just that, I get involved in other sports too. So I'm a big F1 fan. I'm a big MMA, UFC fan. I'm an Arsenal fan as well, and we actually just won last night. So go Arsenal! And yeah, I'm just an all round kind of sports guy. But the NFL is my thing. Like the NFL is my passion, sort of, and that's the thing that I always find myself talking about or watching, researching. Like I said, I'm pretty much counting down until the start of the new season. I can't wait for it to get started.
Yeah, and you mentioned the end of the season or the beginning of the season. The Hall of Fame game was on Thursday. Basically, we're a month out from the Bills and Rams kicking off. But you also mentioned too you played in the you played football for 11 years. Where did you play? And you said you played running back, correct?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people don't know that we have. Well, number one, obviously, it's a big sport over there in the states, as we know.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of the states, there is a huge American football community throughout Europe, and UK is one of those countries. We pretty much every city over here has a team. Every uni has a couple teams, from flag football all the way up to full contact. We have players from the UK, as you may or may not have heard, who make it out into the NFL multiple times. F.A. Abada is one of the names. Um, Christian Wade is another guy who was part of the international NFL pathway program and signed with the Buffalo Bills and would have scored a couple of crazy touchdowns that kind of went viral. But the UK, Austria, Germany, like we all have the sport. I played for 11 years as a running back. Played a little bit of receiver as well, but the quality of ball here is obviously very different compared to the
Mm-hmm.
States. I mean, it's your guys' bread and butter. Over here, we tend to the thing is normally rugby or soccer, as you guys know. Um, but we do have a huge. I mean, look, you just have to look at the international games. They sell out every single year,
Mm-hmm.
and this year we're back to 4 games, which is great. So yeah, we do have a big community, and I think slowly but surely the kind of promo and the marketing for that is kind of dominating and taking over the UK hopefully at some point.
Yeah, and you said the American football is getting popular there in UK, and I think having the international games, I forgot about there being 4 games this year. I keep on thinking there was 3 because normally there's 3, now there's 4, and of course there's a game in Germany, there's a game in Mexico, but the Germany game should be interesting as well. But helping those international games I think has really helped. And if you go way back, I used to play with them on Madden 05, but if you go back to the NFL Europa and when the league was in Europe for a few years,
Mm,
I think that kind of helped it as well. Unfortunately, it didn't, survive or whatever. But I think,
yeah.
having the NFL, the best, helps it a lot more. So let's start talking. Let's get back. Let's start talking about the NFL. Now, of course, the Hall of Fame game, as I recently mentioned, was on Thursday. What most excites you about this NFL season in general, or just what excites you the most about this season?
So I feel like, and I say this on a few different shows that I appear on, but I feel like at the end of every NFL season, I always say how that was the best season ever, and it can't ever top that. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
now finding myself saying again that this off season is the craziest off season that I think I've seen. From Denver signing Russell Wilson to Devontae Adams making his way across to the AFC West. it's just, I think it's just been insane. So for me, I think it's quite easy. The AFC West is what I'm most excited about because those are four serious powerhouse teams that all have something to play for. They all have key playmakers on their teams. They've all got good quarterbacks, be it or not. People like to include or not include Derek Carr in that top four in the AFC West. But I don't think it gets better than that. I mean, anytime those guys play each other or come against teams, it's just going to be fireworks every single time. And I'm just curious to see how it kind of all pans out. So without a doubt, it's the AFC West. No questions asked.
Well, speaking of the AFC West, that division is stacked, and I don't think, I mean, there's a chance that all four could make it, but that would be almost impossible. But what team do you have winning? I mean, do you have the most common answer, which most people I think would still say the Chiefs, but what team do you think will actually win the division this year?
I definitely don't have the Chiefs winning. I don't have the Chiefs winning the AFC. So I've had this discussion with a few different people, and one of the takes I've heard is that the Chargers are trash, pretty much. Obviously, we know there's a lot of talk about Justin Herbert. He is a top tier caliber quarterback, but he hasn't, proved it yet as such. But for me, I think I have been saying the Chargers, and I'm something in my mind is every day I'm thinking of something different. I'm thinking I don't know if the hype is real. I mean, Justin Herbert is a great quarterback, and they've got great guys like Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler. Their defense is unreal, probably the best defense in the AFC West, and defense does win championships. So I guess I've just convinced myself. I'll still go with the Chargers. I will say though, the Raiders are a dark horse for me in that league. And like I said, every day I'm looking at news stories. I'm thinking about their team. I'm looking at their offense, and their secondary isn't great, the Raiders. But you've obviously got from Arizona Cardinals, Chris Jones, who's there alongside Max Crosby, who just signed that huge deal. So yeah, part of me thinks that they could be like a dark horse kind of team. People kind of underrate Derek Carr quite a bit. But I'll stick with the Chargers, and I think they should be able to do it.
I like the Chargers too, and I did say that for my bold prediction, the Chiefs wouldn't win the division, but I got a feeling they might end up. But they actually got worse over the offseason. I mean, they lost Tyreek Hill. They did replace him with Juju Smith-Schuster, but I feel like Juju's a better number 2 than a number 1. They did bring in MVS, which I'm not sure is a huge addition, but it was something. They still do have Travis Kelce, but this Chargers team, I mean, it's stacked. I mean, you mentioned their defense. They have Nick Bosa. They brought in Khalil Mack. And they only had to give up a second-round pick for him, too, which is crazy. Then you already they brought in J.C. Jackson. They have Derwin James. But I feel like if something does happen to a team that just like something bad, like the bad luck happens to a team, it's usually the Chargers, right? But I like the Broncos, too, but I just don't know if they have enough. And then the Raiders side, I think they have, Devontae Adams, Hunter Renfrow. They have Darren Waller. They might end up trading Josh Jacobs, which I think Josh Jacobs is still a good running back. But my concern with the Raiders is they have a head coach who is a former Patriots assistant, and none of the Patriots assistants do well. So that's kind of my concern with the Raiders. But I think I'm going to agree with you. I think the Chargers do win that division, but if something bad happens, it always seems to happen to the Chargers. So, I mean, did you have anything else you want to add to that? Or
I'm so the one thing about the Raiders for me, and it's always bugged me, is the running back room. And you mentioned Josh Jacobs. I'm not sold on him. I just don't see. He's a great running back. He's a good running back. He isn't anything that's going to win you games or anything like that. I think that and their secondary are, I think they're weak points for me personally. If anything's going to let them down, I think it's that. Not that Derek Carr needed excuses, but you don't really have any now that you have that three-headed monster that you just mentioned in Devontae Adams, Darren Waller, and Hunter Renfrow, who it's a case of pick your poison, really. So for me, he's a good running back, and you would hope with guys like those three that I mentioned spreading the field, Josh Jacobs should see a lot of, he won't see stacked boxes or anything of the like, which will obviously go in his favor. But yeah, that's just Abraham in the safety. He's all right. He's good. I just think that those would be their weak points. But as far as I'm concerned, like the Broncos are were a close one for me. Obviously, they lost Tim Patrick to, I think it was a full ACL tear. And they still have their weapon, Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, who's a huge target for them, KJ Hamler as well, who's great in the slot. But then you look at their backfield; they have top 3 backfields in the NFL with Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams. So and then you stick Russell Wilson in there, a young up and coming defense, and you got Surtain the second. So yeah, I think Broncos could be up there, but I will stick with the Chargers definitely.
Yeah, I like the Chargers too, and seemed like last year too they had a few games that just got away from them. I think Brandon Staley kind of outsmarted himself sometimes with a few calls he made. I know they got blown out against the Ravens, but he decided to go for it his own 19-yard line. Not a
Yeah,
smart
yeah,
decision, and that kind of affected the game there because I think the game was still somewhat relatively close, right? So
yeah.
he's made some interesting decisions, but I feel like if Al goes well and they actually stay healthy and Derwin James can stay healthy, that Chargers team is going to be scary. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there was a bunch of new coaches this year, and it seems like in the NFL, there's always like 6 to 8 new head coaches, right? But what rookie
Mm-hmm.
coach do you think will have the most success this season?
So, firstly, I will shout out Kevin O'Connell, who's obviously gone from the Rams to the
Mm-hmm.
Vikings. I think the Vikings needed the change of just change of everything, really.
Mm-hmm.
Um, having when they had in the defensive head coach, they had things get a bit stale. And you've got the likes of Dalvin Cook. We know what Justin
Mm-hmm.
Jefferson can do. He's, top 3 wide receiver in the league. But you also got Alan Thielen and up and coming KJ Osborne, another wide receiver. They trade for Zadarius Smith to the defense, bring him over to the defense. So they've got a lot going for them. I'll also shout out Dolphins, Mike McDaniel. I think he's the right guy to bring the best out of Tua. And you mentioned Tua, he goes hand in hand with Tyreek Hill. And for the money you're paying him, you better get him the ball. So there's a lot going on there too.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to give it to Nathaniel Hackett, who's obviously come over from the Packers and is now the head coach of the Denver Broncos. And when I saw his reaction when they landed Russell Wilson, I think it was very much just, well, it's Russell Wilson. There's nothing more to say. You know what he brings to the table. The whole let's ride thing that's been going around, I can't lie, it is really funny. And I know loads of people, like memes and things about it, but I think Nathaniel Hackett has adopted the squad, like I mentioned, with a ridiculous 1-2 punch at running back, talent all around the wide receiver position, and the tight end department, and the defense is young and up and coming, and they have guys like Patrick Surtain who leads that defense. You would hope Nick Chubb sort of comes to the fore a bit and pressures the quarterback a bit more, but yeah, I think that's a good for Nathaniel Hackett. That's a good squad to take on. You've got stars all over the place, and when you have Russell Wilson as your quarterback, you can kind of do whatever the hell you want, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean that Nathaniel Hackett can go into the Broncos. When he first went to the Broncos, I thought that would meant they were going to make a trade for Rodgers. Now they trade for Russell Wilson. That's a great plan B option, right? But I do think Nathaniel Hackett will have success. I think the Broncos will finally be able to make the playoffs. But Kevin O'Connell's another guy too. You mentioned he's going to be really good, and you could clearly tell last year Mike Zimmer was getting frustrated, and he seemed
Yeah,
like he wasn't. It was time for him to retire or just take a few years off, right? So, um,
yeah,
and the Vikings, they have a lot of talent too, as you mentioned. I totally forgot about KZ Osborne, but then you also have Justin Jefferson, top 10 receiver, could even be considered a top 5 receiver, right? Then you had Adam Thielen, who's a nice number
yeah.
2 option. You got Dalvin Cook, clearly a top 3 running back in my opinion. So I mean that team looks scary. The defense, people always seem to forget about Harrison Smith. I totally forgot about them picking up Zadarius Smith. So that Vikings team is going to have success. So I would probably say Kevin O'Connell. But
Okay.
Nathaniel Hackett could make the playoffs. I liked the Jaguars hiring
Yeah,
of Doug
Doug
Peterson,
Peterson.
but
Yeah,
as we saw on Thursday night, I know it's just a preseason game. It's the Hall of
yeah,
Fame game, but it's going to be a long road for him because that team
yeah,
is just, and you could
yeah.
definitely
It's
tell
bad.
there's, yeah. I mean, it's just Urban Meyer did a terrible did a terrible
Yeah,
job there, and
yeah.
it's going to take him a few years. So
Mm-hmm.
we'll see. But I do think it's either going to be Kevin O'Connell or Nathaniel Hackett, and I guess Josh McDaniels too, but just a former Patriots assistant I can't
Yeah,
trust.
he
So
doesn't just he personally as a Colts fan, I don't like him anyway.
yeah.
Obviously the whole accept the job, refuse the job, go running
Mhm.
back to sort of pay. Yeah, I'm not. There's something about him that I feel like I just feel like he doesn't know how to connect with players properly. Like he can't win a locker room. That's how I feel about him. And when you have guys like that at the Raiders, Derek Carr's a very personable guy, and I know he had his issues with John Gruden as well. Yeah, I'm not so sure on that one. I mean, they got a great squad, but it's got to be top down and trickle down, and McDaniels just seems a bit too washy for me. But we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, and yeah, again, he had some success in Denver early on, but
Yeah.
afterwards it kind of went all to crap. So We'll see. But I do like Kevin O'Connell, and as you mentioned, Nathaniel Hackett. Now, the whole Deshaun Watson case, he was suspended for 6 games. Now the NFL is going to appeal it. They want a year suspension. There was also reports too that it could possibly be a 12-game suspension. They could kind of meet in the middle here. Um, what do you think Deshaun Watson will be suspended? Do you think he'll be suspended for the entire year, or what do you think?
So I didn't actually know they talk of the 12 games. I mean, like you say, I had heard they want the indefinite, the whole season, the
Mm-hmm.
17 games. I think it probably will end up being that, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
They were quite NFL were quite quick to turn in their appeal, which is a kind of a sign of towards their intent. But like you say, yeah, I mean, if you look at what the kind of the stats anyway, the 230 million guaranteed is the most in league history. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's a crazy amount of money. But I believe the way the Browns set up the contract was he's only earning, I think, quite a low amount in his first year. I think it might even be as low as 1 million,
Yeah.
something like that. Which basically means that if they do find him, I think there's only a certain percent, a max percent they can find him, which I think it works out to something crazy, like 100, 500,000 that he potentially could be fined. Um, but then you have to think about the other side of this story, like all the multiple women that are in question.
Mm-hmm.
Other people have sort of who have gone through this similar sort of thing, um, and it almost seems like he's been given a slap on the wrist. And you shouldn't compare to other incidents in the league, but there have been so many different incidents which have been punished for less.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's just, yeah, it's kind of a mockery of the whole thing. I pretty much think he'll be suspended indefinitely. I think that probably will happen. And if not that, then I do think he'll get the 12 games that you mentioned. And that leaves Jacoby Brissett to take over the reins for the
Mm-hmm.
for the Browns. He did a similar thing for us at the Colts. He's an okay quarterback. He's not a game winner type quarterback. So the Browns, they're going to feel quite. I don't know what their plans are, but Jacoby Brissett will probably be the guy starting without a doubt.
Yeah, and, I think dude Deshaun Watson is probably going to be suspended for the entire year. I think the NFL is not going to rest. Now, there's a bunch of things that could happen. Like I heard that the NFLPA could possibly try to appeal the decision, and if somehow that works, he could possibly
Mm-hmm.
play in Week 1, which just gets really confusing. But I feel like he should be at least suspended a year. But I mean, we'll see what
Mm.
happens. But with the Browns, do you think Jacoby Brissett can, if well, so just say if he gets suspended for the entire year, what do you think the Browns' record will be? And do you think Jacoby Brissett can lead them to the playoffs, and especially in a tough conference?
I mean, yeah, you mentioned it. The conference determines a lot of things as well. I mean, if
Mm-hmm.
you have a decent quarterback who is clean and he can perform, then you're looking at a good number of games. When you have a tandem like Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb in the backfield,
Mm-hmm.
you've traded to Amari Cooper, who is a stud in himself. You've got guys like Donovan Peoples-Jones, um, and a good defense. Miles Garrett is always there, so it's interesting because I don't know if playing Jacoby Brissett gets him that many wins. I mean, there's only so much you can do in the run game. You might have one of the better one-two running backs in the league, but if you can't get the ball downfield, or you can't connect with receivers, and you just can't play the quarterback position as well as you need to, at least to be able to open the run up and up the run anyway, then you're going to struggle. And if
Mm-hmm.
Jacoby Brissett starts, I don't know if they win. I don't know if they win 8 games or even 7 games. I'm not sure. It's just even 6 games. I mean, he's okay. Don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
He's a capable quarterback, but he is completely different to Deshaun Watson and pretty much
Yeah.
a lot of other quarterbacks in the league. So they'll be in some trouble. They'll be in some trouble for sure.
Yeah. And I know they did pick up Josh Rosen, but that's not really it. I mean, they picked
In
him up,
fact, I
but
forgot. I kind of forgot from Arizona, right?
yeah.
Yeah, I kind of forgot about him. So
And do you think, and I know they're paying Deshaun Watson a bunch of money, but they're not really having to pay him a lot. I think they're paying him, as you mentioned, just around 1 or 1.5 million or something. Do you think they should make a trade for Jimmy Garoppolo?
see, before all of this kind of happened, and when there was talk of Trey Lance is going to be, I'm talking like earlier this year.
Mm-hmm.
I've always kind of had the opinion that Jimmy Garoppolo should have been traded before the Deshaun Watson trade. Anyway, should have been traded to the Browns because for me, that feels like a great fit. I feel like Jimmy Garoppolo would, he could sort of stabilize that offense.
Mm-hmm.
He was pretty much like one interception away from making it to the Super Bowl in earlier this season, so like this
Mm-hmm.
year even. So, I mean, you kind of look at their setup. the Browns that is, and you plug in someone like Jimmy Garoppolo, I think he would be a very capable quarterback, and he would do some good things for them. He's recently been cleared to practice fully, obviously in regards to his shoulder. So whether they go and trade for him now, I think it'd be a headache. I don't know how they would manage. I mean, you've got Deshaun Watson pending, with whether it's going to happen to him. I mean, they must have put some kind of clause in their contract for a get out card for them. I mean, they wouldn't be that silly, or maybe they were. Jacoby Brissett, again, I'd rather have Jimmy Garoppolo, but it's a case of, if you are going to bring him in, what are you going to pay the guy? I mean, you've just committed to 230 million in guaranteed money to the most in the league's history. So it's a headache. And I'm glad I'm not a Browns fan, put it that way.
Well, the thing too about if you do make the trade for Garoppolo, when Watson comes back, you're either going to have to release him and still pay him all that money, or you're going to have to do the same thing the 49ers did and try to find a trade partner. And it seems like Garoppolo is a serviceable, he's a solid quarterback, right? But I feel like his market isn't as high as many people would think. But he did make the Super Bowl, but there was a reason why the Niners didn't win the Super Bowl, and that was because of Garoppolo. So, I mean, if I was the Browns, honestly, I don't know what I would do if I was the Browns. I'd maybe try to convince Ryan Fitzpatrick to come out of retirement. Maybe I don't know. I don't know if I would make the trade for Garoppolo, especially having to pay him all that money. So we'll see. We'll definitely be. We'll keep an update on the Deshaun Watson situation. But let's speak of another quarterback, and he won the MVP a few years ago. He's definitely deserving of a contract, in my opinion. But Lamar Jackson still hasn't got his contract yet. And I know his mother's his agent, and he kind of represents himself. So he doesn't really have an agent, but that's kind of what his mother's there for. I think she's helping him a lot with that. Do you think, or let's just first start with this first. Do you think Lamar Jackson will get a contract before the regular season starts?
I don't think he will get a contract before the regular season starts. Again, I listen to so many different podcasts and read so many articles. And the one thing that I keep seeing about the Deshaun Watson situation is, obviously, this is his fifth-year option. And there's a lot of talk about him personally wanting to prove that he's actually worth the big deal that he will eventually get. Because it's, I mean, if Kyler Murray's getting that, then, Lamar Jackson's going to get paid. And there's talk about him wanting to prove it himself by going out and winning a Super Bowl, or at least getting to the Super Bowl. Now, last season, the Ravens are one of those teams that were just completely destroyed on all fronts, and they did okay. Lamar Jackson was injured for part of that too. But yeah, I mean, I definitely don't see it happening before the start of the season. I mean, we're 4 weeks away from the start of the season. I can't see it being before that. But there's also talk. I don't know how much you've heard this, but there is a talk about him potentially he could want to test the free market. Now, if that happens, the whole NFL goes into meltdown, because Lamar Jackson's he's a once in a lifetime kind of opportunity at quarterback. Some people, as we saw with anonymous QYZ, whoever they're called, all the anonymous quotes about him not being a real quarterback and all this kind of stuff. But you see what he does. You can see how he wins games off his own back. So there is a lot of talk about, if he does make it to the free market and potentially doesn't, sign a new deal with the Ravens, what on earth happens then? I mean, I'm pretty sure there's a few quarterback needy teams out there, and I wonder what they'd be willing to pay for someone like Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, the Ravens, if Jackson does test free agency, they're in some deep trouble, because honestly, he's their whole team right now. Because you looked at last year when he went out, they were 8-4. And then he goes out and they end up finishing the year 8-9. They don't win a single game without Lamar. Now, I guess they did win the one game against the Bears when he had an illness, but when he missed the last 5 weeks of the season, they just were complete. I mean, they fought hard, right? But if they would have had Lamar Jackson, they would have at least won 1 or 2 games, and they probably would have made the playoffs. So, I wouldn't be surprised too if they can't reach a deal to where they franchise tag Lamar, because I think they can do that. But after that, I feel like they would just give him a contract right after that. But do you think, and I think this is way overblown, but some people think, you have to have an agent like Mike Florio, right? I don't necessarily think you have to have an agent. I mean, agents do take a decent percentage of your money, but do you think that's smart what Lamar is doing, or should he get an agent?
I mean, you are right. You don't need one. You don't need one. But I mean, the job of an agent is to secure your future, to get you a great deal and put you in the best position possible. and that is what they're meant to do. So in that respect, you would imagine, all right, if you do get a good agent, that said agent can be, whipping up potential like mouth-watering, eye-watering, game-changing, or market resetting deals that we've seen happen in the NFL. I don't know if it's a loyalty thing that his mum he's had it that way and he's kept it that way. He wants it. It might be another case of, there's a lot of crazy stories that happen out there with people being, live, deceit, and trust. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of that goes on, and it might be a case of him wanting to keep it internal. He can, monitor everything. At the end of the day, it's his mum, so everything is on the table. Nothing's kind of behind closed doors. But I see both sides. I do see both sides. I mean, keeping it up close and personal means he has all hands on whatever's happening, and then if he does have an agent, yes, agent can get him a bigger deal, and he would take a big cut of that. But without that agent, I don't know. I mean, I guess he's allowing his play. That's why I say it's a case of him wanting to go out there and just show people and prove it. So, I guess the agent isn't necessarily needed in his eyes.
Yeah, like I said, an agent does take a certain percentage of your money. And yes, I understand it's a safe way to go with an agent, but there's been a lot of players that have been able to get deals. I think Laramie Tunsil was an example where he didn't have an agent, but he was able to secure the bag, right? So I think, it's safe to have an agent, but I don't think it's required. You know what I mean? But we all know that if the Ravens don't give Lamar Jackson a new deal, they're in trouble. I think they will. I don't think they'll get a deal done before the season starts. And I don't know if they can give him a deal while the season is going, because he's probably going to be too focused on, winning games and helping the Ravens make the playoffs again. But I mean, I think he's going to eventually get the deal. I just don't think it comes before the season starts. So speaking of the AFC North, do you think a team like the Bengals, do you think they'll take a step back, or where do you think the Bengals are after last year's incredible run?
So the Bengals are really, really interesting because I did a content piece on them the other day. I think there was a stat from the Football Outsiders, I think they're called, which essentially says, number one, the AFC North last season was totally banged up. I mentioned already the Ravens, you got Pittsburgh, Baker Mayfield was banged up, and as a result, look what's happened there. But essentially, the Bengals, all the teams that I think they faced the most injured teams throughout their season. And luckily for them, they pretty much managed to stay healthy. Obviously, Joe Burrow's coming off that horrific injury that he had. And, you pair him with someone like Jamar Chase, they've pretty much transformed that franchise. And you can see that. I mean, I think I've seen it pretty much everywhere. They've been rated as the top wide receiver core in the league with Jamar Chase. I forget who the other,
T. Higgins.
That's one. Yeah. Tyler Boyd.
Yeah.
They have a great receiving core. So you look at what they've been able to do, pretty much make it all the way to the Super Bowl, but they've had a lot of luck. And don't get me wrong, it's the NFL. You need luck to swing your way quite a lot of the time, and it does happen. But for them to face the most injured teams throughout their run to the Super Bowl, whilst they managed to stay fit. And don't get me wrong, that's not their fault. If other teams are hurt and injured, it's not their fault. You can only play who's in front of you. But for that to be their record, I'm not so sure that repeats itself, because that's just not a stat that happens year on year. The Ravens aren't going to be as injured as they were having to sign guys like Devontae Freeman and Le'Veon Bell. That's not going to be the case this season. So personally, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure they'll be as good as they were last season. I definitely don't think they'll make it back to the Super Bowl. I know they've reinforced their offensive line, because you can't be getting sacked 9 times in a game, albeit they did win against the Titans. But I do think, they had quite a bit of luck, and I don't think that luck continues into next season for them.
Yeah, and I think the Bengals make the playoffs this year, but I think they take a bit of a step back. And I know this isn't huge, but recently, Joe Burrow had his appendix taken out, right? And I think that's going to serve a little bit of a because he's not going to be able to throw for another week or two, so that's going to hurt. And then I don't think, like I said, and the AFC just got better in the offseason, right? So I can't see the Bengals going all the way they did. Now, they did look very impressive, especially beating the Chiefs twice in the regular season and in the postseason. But, if the Chiefs kick a field goal at the end of the first half, they probably win. But I do like the Bengals a lot. I think they have a great team with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and they have a good running back in Joe Mixon, and their defense got better. Their offensive line helping. Of course, you have Joe Burrow, who's going to get a big contract next season probably. But I just think they're gonna and again, I think they're gonna take a bit of a step back. I think I have the Ravens winning the division if they can stay healthy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what Pittsburgh's going to look like because I don't know if their offense is as good. Their defense is stacked. I think their secondary is a little weak, but their defense is definitely with T.J. Watt and Cameron Hayward, right? But I just don't know what they're going to do at quarterback. And the Browns, of course, with the whole Deshaun
Mm-hmm.
Watson, as we just talked about. So I think the Ravens do win the division. I think the Bengals make the playoffs, but after that, I can't see another team in the AFC North winning. But speaking of the Steelers, who do you
Yeah.
think they should start at quarterback? Do you think they should go with Trubisky? I mean, I've heard Mason Rudolph's been impressive. I don't think he's going to play. Kenny Pickett eventually is going to get in there somewhere, but
Yeah.
who do you think is going to start in week one for the Steelers?
Okay, so you've got Rudolph, who we've basically seen what he is. We've seen how he performs. We've seen him
Mhm.
play. We know what the real deal is. You've got Mitch, who was touted as the most ready quarterback in the draft. That just happened in April, and then obviously you've got Mitch, who was hailed as the next best thing, having worked under Josh Allen and the Bills for however long he was there. Now, in my eyes, you have guys like Deontay Johnson, who just signed, I think, a 30-something million
Mhm.
deal, wide receiver, who has upped his game and managed to pretty much catch most things as opposed to dropping balls that he was doing last season. Chase Claypool, who is a big talent, we know he's a big talent. He's a downfield threat; he can get it done. Najee Harris concerns me slightly because I feel like they overuse him, and as a running
Mhm.
back, it only ends one way. It only ends one way, and it's not good. Look at Todd Gurley; he's kind of sort of banged up and never came back.
Mhm.
Um, so without having, we haven't really seen too much of Mitch. I've seen Rudolph. I feel like it's going to. Sorry, haven't seen too much of Pickett. We know what Carl Rudolph is. I'm leaning Mitch.
Mhm.
Um, I say that, and it's just occurred to me that I did read an article about Mitch struggling in camp. Now, these are the same people that said Jamar Chase couldn't catch a ball in practice, and he went and just torched the entire league.
No.
So, um, I feel like Mitch Trubisky is more pro ready. He's had the experience, albeit it wasn't great with the Bears. He's had some time under the Bills management. Josh Allen is probably, in my opinion, and I won't spoil it, but Josh Allen is one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and to sit under his wing and that kind of management, I feel like Mitch technically should be the guy, and I'd be surprised if he isn't really.
Yeah, I think you're right too. I think eventually Pickett will will become the starting quarterback eventually, but I think it's probably smart to roll with Trubisky. Again, anything can happen in camp. An injury could happen at camp, and maybe one of their quarterbacks go down. Maybe they have to make a move for Garoppolo, right? But I think at the end of the day, I think Trubisky wins. But I think in like week 4 or week 5, if the Steelers are 1-3 or 2-3, or if they don't have a winning record, they're just squeezing by 500. The fans are probably going to want Pickett, right? So I
Yeah,
think Pickett will get a start probably in week 5 or week 6. But I mean, I don't think Rudolph's going to win. I think he's just kind of
no,
there as an extra quarterback. But I think at the end of the day, Trubisky gets the starting nod. But I think by week 5 or week 6, you'll see Pickett. And, maybe the Steelers every once in a while roll with Pickett on like a third down or something to where he can make a play or something like that. But I think by week 5 or week 6, we'll see Pickett out there. And eventually after this season, if Pickett performs well enough, he'll be the guy going forward. But a lot of things can happen, but I can't see Pickett or Rudolph getting the starting nod. I'm agreeing with you. I think Trubisky will eventually be the starting quarterback.
yeah.
Now, let's go. Let's go start talking about the league again, and just in general. Which
Mm-hmm.
team that made the playoffs last year do you think will take a major step back or won't be as good as everybody's saying? And what's a team that kind of is a dark horse that could come out of nowhere and make the postseason?
So the failed sort of playoff team, if you like. We were just speaking about them. I'm concerned about the Steelers. I don't know if they make it back.
Mm-hmm.
Big Ben is no longer. He's gone. He's retired from the league. He did so much for that franchise and
Mm-hmm.
pretty much won so many games for them and did amazing things with them, the Super Bowls included. Um, so he's a big miss, a huge miss. And again, we just mentioned that the three-headed kind of options with Rudolph, Mitch, and Pickett. And I think no matter which one of those you start, I just don't see them being able to carry them back to the playoffs. I mean, I know you've got Najee Harris, but again, there's only so much you can do with him. You can't overuse him. Otherwise, you run him into the ground. Um, you got the guys on the outside. I know they've got Pickens that they drafted from, I think, Georgia as well. He looks like a great talent. But at the end of the day, it kind of starts from the quarterback position. And I feel like even if they do go with Mitch, I just don't know if there's enough there. I don't know if there's enough there. You can run the ball, but if you can't open up the run with the pass, then you're going to find yourself in some hot water. So I think they would be the team that I think don't make it back. My sleeper team, and I've said it all season long, and people get at me for this all the time, is actually the Lions. I love everything that, I mean, don't get me wrong, they're not going to make it to the Super Bowl. That's not going to happen, and they won't win their division either. But if you look at last season, I mean, I know Dan Campbell was very like rah rah and wanted to bite people and all this kind of madness. I think the team has a lot of fight in them naturally from passed down from Dan Campbell. And again, you look at some of the games, or quite a few of their games last season, they were narrow losses. Majority of some of them were field goals, last minute wins. You flip that around and they've won quite a few games as opposed to their record last season. I look at their squad. They drafted Jameson Williams, who I love as a wide receiver. I know he was a little bit hurt. Trade for DJ Chark from the Jaguars, who was someone that I actually quite liked. I mean, Amon St. Ra, Khalif Raymond, guys that we saw really show up towards the end of last season and make a difference, especially when they beat the Ravens at the end of that game. DeAndre Swift is healthy. He's a game changer in himself. But you've also got Justin Jackson, who they've just signed from the Chargers. Jamal Williams, ex-Packers running back. And obviously you've got Godwin Igwebuike as well, who I think they signed from the Vikings. He was the kick returner that was, I think he scored a couple of the house calls. Obviously, they've drafted Aiden Hutchinson. Now, that's not enough to transform a defense, but it's a good start. As someone who can, develop that defense and really take the lead. But you've got Jeff Okudah, the cornerback, who's coming back from injury. I think a lot of people have forgotten about him. He was injured quite early on as well. So I just feel like they have some of the right pieces. They have some other good pieces on defense too. But again, they won't make the Super Bowl. They won't win the division. But I think they're a team that people will be. I think they'll win more games than people think they should, or people think they will. And Dan Campbell, he's doing something right there.
Yeah, I like Dan Campbell as well. I think he's definitely a great motivator, especially with them being on with Hard Knocks. That's going to be interesting. But I like Detroit as well. I just don't know if they can I think they can take the next step into where there may be a 7-win team or an 8-win team. I'm just concerned with Jared Goff. I don't think Jared Goff's a very good quarterback. I think he was decent in LA or / St. Louis, but he was good in there because of Sean McVay, right? Now,
and because of Todd Gurley.
Exactly, yeah. And I don't know. I think he's kind of their weak point. Now, I think they're going to have to figure out what they're going to do at quarterback after this year. I was really surprised they didn't draft one. I know the draft class wasn't great with quarterbacks, but I was really surprised they didn't even take one the 3rd or 4th round. I like them a lot too. I could see them winning 7 or 8 games. I'm just really concerned about Jared Goff. I think T.J. Hawkinson is a great tight end. I think he's probably top 5. DeAndre Swift's is a good up and coming running back. I think Detroit has finally found their number 1 running back. Now, I've said that before. I said the same thing with Amir Abdullah, and he was completely trash after that. So, and then Kerryon Johnson was supposed to be the next guy, and we've had those, but it just seems like DeAndre Swift could be the next running back for Detroit as long as they use him well. And their offensive line is actually one of their strong points. I mean, Taylor Decker. They also got Frank Ragnow. I think he missed most of last season with like a toe injury or something like that.
Yeah, that's one.
I really like their offensive line, but Detroit's an interesting team, definitely. I think Minnesota, a lot of people are sleeping on them. I think if they can figure out, I think as we mentioned early on, Kevin O'Connell is a good hire, but I think Kirk Cousins can finally probably not win the division, but they can maybe go back and win a playoff game, right? A team that I don't think will make the playoffs from last year, I could see the Patriots not making the playoffs. I could also not see the Steelers make the playoffs as well. I think the Patriots were good enough last year, but you saw in that playoff game when they played against Buffalo, the Bills just torched them. So those two teams, the Patriots and Steelers, I could see missing the playoffs. I don't know if I necessarily have a dark horse right now. I think Philly, we've kind of already mentioned that they're going to be a good team. I could see Dallas also missing the playoffs. I just don't know if I have enough trust in the Cowboys. But I could see a team like the Eagles. I know they made the playoffs last year, but I could see them actually winning a playoff game. And maybe New Orleans breaks into the playoffs, and maybe Jameis Winston becomes the quarterback that when he was drafted. I mean, we've seen he can be really good, but maybe the Saints. But the two teams I definitely don't think will make the playoffs again, or the three teams would be the Steelers, Patriots, and Cowboys. People are probably going to
Yeah.
disagree with me.
Okay.
And then the Dolphins are another team too I could see making the playoffs after last year
Mm-hmm.
just being one game away. So, anyways, that could all
Yeah.
happen, but we'll see. Now the MVP predictions. Do you have an MVP? I know it's really early. It's like a Super Bowl prediction, but who do you think has a
Yeah.
legitimate shot of winning the MVP this season?
I mean, firstly, I don't know if Aaron Rodgers should have been the MVP last season anyway,
Yeah.
but I think it's got to be Josh Allen this time around. Like the guy is just, he has come on in leaps and bounds from when he was drafted and spent a whole off season refining his mechanics. And not only does he have the arm, he can scramble. We've seen him rush the ball as well, jump over and through piles. I mean, just look at that Kansas City game, which a lot of people were saying was the Super Bowl because, I mean, it was amazing, right? Josh Allen for me, I think he's got great odds at being the MVP because he's just extremely good. He's just very, very good. I mean, you have weapons like Diggs, you've got Taylor Gabriel, you've got Isaiah McKenzie, who's up and coming as well. Yeah, I mean, Von Miller's now joining the defense, so that's a great boost for them. Which will keep them in games and blow up offensive lines and get to the quarterback, put the ball in Josh Allen's hands. So I think for me, it's got to be Josh Allen. I can't see it being anybody else. It's got to be Josh Allen.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned like just before or when you first started talking that Aaron Rodgers probably shouldn't have won the MVP. I agreed with you there. I think either Tom Brady or Cooper Kupp should have won the MVP, but Cooper Kupp's a wide receiver, so he wasn't winning the MVP.
Exactly.
But my MVP prediction, I actually had a bold prediction recently in saying Kyler Murray could win the MVP.
Wow.
However, toward the end of the season, that's kind of where I get a little concerned. But if Kyler Murray, can put in the work, and I think he already puts in the work, but if he could focus a little more, I think he can be an MVP because you saw early in the season, he looks like a top 5 quarterback, right? Yeah. But toward the end of the season is where he starts to struggle. And I know they lost to Detroit last year, which was just a bad loss for him. But if he can and I know he's already come in and did a press conference and said, he does the work and, he already says he does the work and stuff. But I feel like if Kyler Murray does even more and studies more and stuff like that, I think he can be the MVP. But this might come back to haunt me. A lot of predictions I said Carson Wentz would do well in Indianapolis. That clearly didn't happen.
Oh, man.
So we'll see what happens. But I think Kyler Murray could win. Another MVP that I could possibly see, of course, you mentioned Josh Allen, but if Lamar can have another good season, he could get the MVP as well. A lot of people, though, were saying Justin Herbert, too. But
I'm not sure on that one.
Yeah, but we'll see what happens. I mean, it always seems like every week there's a different MVP. I think the last few years it's been that way. I think Colin Cowherd, I was listening to, he said that Russell Wilson could win the MVP, but not
in his first season with a new team. I'm not entirely sure on that one either.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens, but it's just a lot of things could happen, within a month or something like that. But it does seem like every week there was someone new, especially last year. But we'll see what happens. We recently, I think it was on Tuesday, the NFL, made the ruling of Stephen Ross of suspending him for 7 games, fining them. I think it was like $1.5 million, and then stripping them of a first and third round draft pick. Do you think the NFL made the right decision with that?
I don't think they did enough. I mean, you mentioned it there, 1.5 million fine. He's been banned until about week 7, which is probably a good thing for the team because I don't think Ross and their whole management, it just sounds quite poisonous if you ask me. Like the trickle down isn't very good. From trying to tamper with Tom Brady and Sean Payton to get them to join the franchise, and to try and tank to lose games, to try and offer, I think it was 100,000 per game or something around them lines, and then the guy is worth about 8 billion, and he's been fined 1.5, and told to basically stay away from games. I'm sure he'll watch it on a yacht somewhere. They've lost the first round pick in 2003, that's quite bad to be fair, and third round in 2024. But I think they could have done more than that. Personally, could have fined them a hell of a lot more than that. It's not the first time you're hearing of Ross in the news. Like I said, tried to tamper with Brady, and who nearly, I think, bought a stake in the Dolphins or something along those lines. Sean Payton to join the franchise and to tank games, the whole thing with blind throwers. I mean, a 1.5 million fine and a 6 or 7 game ban is literally a slap on the wrist and get on with it. Like, I think they could have done a lot more.
Yeah, I mean he's a billionaire, so like 1.5 million is pocket change for him. That
Yeah.
the story though with Tom Brady was crazy because yeah, Tom Brady was actually going to
Mm-hmm.
own part of the franchise, and on top of that, he was going to play quarterback, right? And
Crazy.
that's not going to happen now because he has
Uh,
he has a massive deal with Fox now after he retires. But
oh yeah.
speaking of Brady, do you think this is his last year in the NFL?
So I mean, with my Colts fan hat on, it'd be good, like Tom Brady and I don't necessarily get along because they always seem to beat the Colts for whatever reason. But props, the guy is a legend, right? He's the best guy to ever play the position in the league. He just turned 45, I believe. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know how he's doing what this TB12 method. I mean, I need some of it because I want to be like him when I get to that age. But the whole thing about retiring and coming out of retirement, at some point, you are going to break down. I
Mm-hmm.
know he's been looking good. And I think last season he broke records or he had his
Mm-hmm.
most I forget what the record was, most complete passes or yards, something at the age of 44. I don't know
Yeah.
how you're doing that. Um, the deal with Fox, personally, I'm not sold on him in the booth. I don't think it works. Sometimes you have to have a bit of personality and you have to be a certain type of character. And I just don't feel like he has that. I could be totally wrong, right? But Drew Brees tried it, didn't really work. Um, I just, I'm not, I don't see how, I mean, it's a big deal. It's a really big deal with Fox, but if it works out, great. If it doesn't, there you go. Do I think he retires? I think he plays 2 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And one, it will heavily depend on how the Bucks do this season. Obviously, they've brought everybody back. They need Chris to get back from his injury. I think they signed him to a 60 million something. I think it was a 60 million deal, something like that. So he's done well to sign that deal based off the back of his injury. But depending on what happens this season, obviously they've got Fournette back. Um, I forget the other running back has been signed somewhere else. Who was his backup running back?
I think it was well, they did have Le'Veon Bell for a little bit, but they had
Yeah, I forget his name. But he's gone elsewhere. His name
yeah.
escapes me. And there's obviously the whole talk about Leonard Fournette or Big Lenny, as some people are calling him, being slightly overweight. But to be fair, at this point, I mean, players are going to start getting into shape a bit. They're in camp, they get their weight down, they got a job to do, and they do it. So the Bucks, I mean, they've got everybody back. So I think I don't think Ndamukong Suh has signed a new deal yet, and he hasn't gone elsewhere. So I'm not sure what's happening on that front. Um, but I think depending on what happens in this season will determine what Brady does next season.
Yeah, and I think you're probably right. I think he will go one more year after this, but I think the only way for Tom Brady to retire is if something happens, if he gets injured and he just can't do the same. Because that's kind of why Peyton Manning retired, right? Because he just couldn't play
Mm.
anymore was the whole deal. And even if Brady wins another Super Bowl, which would be incredible, he's gonna keep on wanting to go. He's gonna like, oh, I just want a Super Bowl. I'm gonna try it again. So
Yeah.
I think the only way he retires if something just happens where he gets an injury where he just can't play anymore. And the whole deal with Fox too, I think that's more of a kind of a thing where Fox is hiring him just because of his namesake, right? Because I
Yeah.
think he's going to be doing more than just football. I think he's going to be doing probably hosting game shows. He's probably going to be doing just a bunch of random stuff for just the network Fox. So I do
Mm.
think with Brady, I think he's more of kind of a namesake for the company, for the network. But again, I think Tom Brady, the only way he retires is if something he just can't
For
play
injury. Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
And the Buccaneers have another great chance because the NFC compared to the AFC is very weak,
Yeah.
and there's really
Yeah.
only 3 teams: the Bucks, Packers, and Rams that can win the division or can win the conference. So, yeah, I think Brady goes probably one more year after this, but I guess it all depends on what happens this year. So,
Yeah.
um, we're starting to thanks again for coming on, and we're almost done with this interview.
That's all
But
good.
do you have a bold prediction or a bold take for
I
this
do.
season?
I do. And it's not a popular one. I'll tell you that. I've had a lot of slack for this one, but I'm sticking to it. I can see a situation where the Kansas City Chiefs finished last in the AFC West. I can just see it.
Wow.
Yeah, everywhere I look, I'm seeing Kansas City winning the division. Don't get me wrong, Andy Reid is a mastermind. We know
Mm-hmm.
that, and Patrick Mahomes is also an amazing quarterback. Um, but we saw towards the end of last season and point through last season, they didn't start very well, and they still had the likes of Kelsey. They had MVS. They did. They had Tyreek Hill, who's now with the Miami Dolphins, and I mean, for me, Tyreek Hill being traded to the Dolphins is a huge, huge, huge deal, because whether or not Tyreek Hill is being targeted, he draws double, triple coverage because he is a game changer. He wins games at the click of a finger. You don't have him anymore. You do have guys like MVS, like you've mentioned, Juju Smith-Schuster, who's coming off that horrific shoulder injury. I'm sorry, I just don't think that's enough. That's not enough. I mean, again, Andy Reid is great, and I'm sure they'll find a way to get guys the ball. I just don't think, that's someone he's irreplaceable. It's kind of in the same way that Aaron Rodgers lost Devontae Adams, as he says, or as Adams says, from one Hall of Famer to another. I just find it too much of a loss to try and to work around this one. They'll win games, don't get me wrong. They've lost Tyrann Mathieu as well. He's gone to the Saints. That's another big deal. So yeah, I can see that situation. The Raiders have improved. The Broncos have massively improved.
Yeah.
And the Chargers, the defense speaks volumes. So I can see it happening. Not a lot of people will agree with that, but I can see a situation where they finish last in the AFC West.
Wow, that's crazy, because I don't have enough, guts to put him last, because it's just Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce. I think they'll probably get second, but even that's not really much of a bold prediction. But I think my bold prediction, and I think most people wouldn't really say this is a bold prediction, but I'm going to say the Cowboys just don't make the playoffs, as I mentioned earlier. I don't trust the Cowboys ever. I don't think McCarthy's a bad coach. I just can't trust the Cowboys because it's the Cowboys, right? They're not the Cowboys of the 90s, which I don't remember because I wasn't around then. So I can't really see the Cowboys. And maybe the Eagles winning a playoff game is also a bold prediction. As I mentioned earlier, I think Kyler Murray is going to win the MVP. That's probably a bolder prediction than anything else. But your prediction is surprising because I just don't have enough guts to say the Chiefs aren't going to make the playoffs. Because I
gotta go bold, right?
Yeah, but yeah, the loss with Tyrann Mathieu is huge. I mean, they replaced him with Justin Reed, but Tyrann Mathieu is probably still a top 3 safety. So to lose a guy like Tyrann Mathieu is huge. But we'll see what the Chiefs do. I mean, the AFC has gotten better and the Chiefs have gotten worse. So we'll see. It's definitely going to be an entertaining season, that's for sure. So. Before we end the interview, and do you have a Super Bowl prediction?
I do, and I'm actually the Bills. I'll put the Bills in there. I don't have any doubt. I mean, again, you look back at the game that they played with Kansas and the whole coin toss drama and everything like that. The Bills are just, they're firepower. Josh Allen does a lot for them, and he will get them to the Super Bowl. And their defense has only gotten stronger, in my opinion. So I don't have any issues there. On the other side of the ball, I'm going between the Bucks and the Rams.
Yeah.
For me, I like what the Rams are doing. Again, they've got everybody back. They've lost Von Miller, obviously. But for me, they've signed from the Bears Khalil Mack, obviously, but they need to. I don't know. Was he at the Chargers?
Oh, he's at the Chargers.
Khalil Mack he's at the Chargers. Yeah, they lost Von Miller. I just feel like. So obviously OBJ did a lot for them.
They got Bobby Wagner too.
Yes, they got Bobby Wagner too from the Seahawks, who is he's a baller through and through, part of the Legion of Doom, which is no more, but the Legion of Boom even. I just think the Rams have done it right. Stafford is such an underrated quarterback.
Yes.
He spent so many years with the Lions, and look how that turned out when you have pretty much just Megatron. I like the Rams. Tampa, I find it hard to say that I can see a 45-year-old quarterback making it to the Super Bowl, but when it's Tom Brady, I don't think you can really doubt it. They've brought the entire squad back, apart from the likes of Ronald Jones is the quarterback I was thinking of earlier, and then Ndamukong Suh. So I can't really see it being any other team. I can't see it being the Packers. I think the Devontae Adams loss is huge. It's absolutely huge. I know you draft Watson. You bring in, I forget who else they've signed, another wide receiver.
Sammy Watkins,
who has been a bit, he hasn't really found his mojo going in the last few seasons. So I'd probably say the Bills versus the Tampa or the Rams. The Bengals won't make it back.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to say the Colts is my team, but I think we won't necessarily make it to the playoffs. I don't think so. So I reckon Bills and either Tampa or Rams. I'm not entirely sure yet. But again, all these teams are one injury away from that being from that collapsing. So
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the Colts, as you mentioned, you're a Colts fan. I think they're going to make the playoffs. I think they win the
yeah,
AFC South. I don't think the
yeah,
Titans make the playoffs. I just think that division is very mediocre. And I think the Colts
yeah,
have a great chance with adding a guy like Matt Ryan. And you already have Jonathan Taylor, a top 3 running back. You do have Michael Pittman, who I think is going to finally become that true number 1 receiver. Mo Alley
mm,
Cox, I think, is the number 1 tight end. The
yeah,
defense is scary, though. They already have DeForest
yeah, man.
Buckner. They added was it Chandler
Stephon
Jones or
Stephon
no,
Gilmore.
that was right. Yeah, they added
So
Stephon
Stephon
Gilmore.
Gilmore, Yannick Ngakoue from the
Yep, that was the
Raiders,
guy.
who I think is in top 3 quarterback pressures in the last
Mm-hmm.
however many years. We lost safety Corey Willis, but we got Justin Blackman back.
Yeah,
Nick
Kenny
Cross
Moore
is someone
too.
we've and Kenny Moore as well.
Mm-hmm.
Isaiah Wright, Rogers. I think we've got a very like low key, like solid defense
Yeah.
without a doubt. I think we're looking good. I do wish we. I'm not sure. The wide receiver room is my only concern for
Mm-hmm.
us Colts because obviously Hilton, whether or not he plays again, I think he's not so far off 10,000 yards as a Colt. So there's a lot of talk about bringing him back so we can sort of achieve that, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to win. We need to win now. So we've obviously drafted Alec Pierce, who I love. I think he's a great wide receiver. You mentioned Michael Pittman. We've got a couple of sleepers that people aren't really paying attention to. Paris Campbell, because he's been injured pretty much every season, but he's healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And he is a huge, deep ball threat. Ashton Julian as well, who is another guy who mainly played special teams last season, but has been showing up at camp.
Yeah.
And obviously we've got the huge tight end that is Jelani Woods. We've got Ogletree as well. I mean, we've got options, but I feel like our wide receiver room could have been a bit better. You've got Reggie Wayne coaching them up. You can't ask for anything else,
Mm-hmm.
anything better than that. So, I mean, we're a great team. There's no reason we don't make the playoffs, but I think the Super Bowl is a bit of a push for us.
Yeah. And I think they probably go 11-6 probably. They have a chance to go in 12-5, but I think 11-6 sounds like a good record. But on the AFC side, I know I'm going to probably be a little biased because I'm a huge Lamar Jackson fan. And the receiving core really scares me because Rashad Bateman's got to become that number 1 receiver right away. Devin Duvernay, I think it's their number 1, which he's a great special teams guy, but I'm not sure he's a great number 1 receiver. But I have the Ravens at the moment, and then I think they take on the Buccaneers. I think the Buccaneers, Rams, or maybe the Packers is only the really scary teams in the NFC. And I think we see the Rams and Buccaneers in Arizona. But I think that's my Super Bowl prediction. We'll see if I actually get that right. I think last year I predicted the Ravens and Rams, and I was really close in the NFC, but I was terrible in the AFC. So, but we'll see what ends up happening. And again, now that we pretty much got all the questions down, do you have anything else you want to add before we end the interview here?
No, I just think we're going to see a very different season, mainly because of the amount of injuries. I mean, you mentioned the Ravens as one of your favorites. They were decimated last season. I mean, I don't know how many running backs they went through. And with all the crazy changes this offseason, I mean, I felt like there was a period where every day there was a ridiculous piece of breaking news of a trade or a new deal, or it was just unreal, and everything just happened to be the AFC West.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you mentioned there's only really 3 teams in the NFC, and everything else is kind of like dead and buried. Which kind of, it narrows it down quite a bit in terms of who the better teams are. But the AFC just continues to heat up. And you've got guys in situations like Kyler Murray with the whole removing of social media and the agent releasing a statement to now being paid his big deal to then being leaked about having to study an extra 4 hours. There's a lot of drama going on right now.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've got the whole Deshaun Watson thing too. But I think the season is going to be, again, I say it every season. I think it'd probably be the greatest season to date. We've sorted out the overtime rules in terms of possessions. We won't have that fiasco anymore. I'm referring to Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. But I think it's going to be a lot of fireworks. I mean, you just look at the trades that have happened in your season and the people that have been drafted in the signings. It's going to be crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I can't wait. It's definitely fun. I'm definitely going to have you on one more time. This was great. But again, thanks for coming on. Don't forget to check out George on sports. All the links will be down in the description below. Again, thanks for coming on, and have a good rest of or have a good weekend and enjoy the season.
Appreciate you for having me on. That was great, and absolutely, whenever you're down to do this again, I never say no to talking football, never, because just as fast as the season comes, we have a long way for it to come. Season goes, we have to wait so long for it to come back. So I'm always down to talk ball. We'll do this again for sure.
All right, thanks again. Don't forget to check out George on Sports. Again, the links will be down in the description below. Thanks for listening to the Sports Town Podcast, or the STP Pod for short. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and much more. Also, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Sports Town Podcast. If you want to check out more videos of the Sports Town Podcast, click on the right.